many of you may not know, because everyone has their own thing going on, because life's for all of us. I am currently in a neck brace, and I'm going to take today's episode to explain what happened and kind of explain, I guess, how I'm processing and how I'm feeling about everything.
Does the universe send signs? 1 week before that fateful night, standing on a stage before tens of thousands of people, Sarah Jakes Roberts delivered a sermon that many now call prophetic. What did she say? And was there a connection between those words and the terrifying incident on the evening of April 18, 2026, when a chilling sound echoed through the darkness of her own backyard? What happened just 9 months after she inherited a $100 million empire? Stay with me for the next 20 minutes as we uncover the 7 things no one knows about that night, the details from the emergency room that no newspaper has ever reported, and the mysteries surrounding one of the most influential women in America, a name that was never small. Some people, it seems, are set on a different path from the moment they're born. Sarah Jakes Roberts was one of them. And to understand the horrifying night on the trampoline, we need to go back to that extraordinary beginning. Understand something first. Sarah Jakes Roberts was never born into an ordinary life. She was born on July 17, 1988, in Texas. Her father was Bishop T.D. Jakes, a man many Americans would come to call the most powerful pastor in the country. In 1996, when Sarah was 8 years old, her father opened a small church in a hotel ballroom. 20 years later, that church became the Potter's House, 30,000 members every Sunday. A television network, branches stretching from Dallas to Los Angeles. Sarah grew up inside what she would later call a fishbowl. Every child stumbles. The difference was, Sarah's stumbles always had thousands of witnesses. Her father wasn't just a pastor. He was a media phenomenon. His books sold by the millions. Oprah Winfrey invited him onto her show. President Obama invited him to pray at the White House. Meanwhile, at home, her mother Sarita tried to raise 5 children like a normal family. It was nearly impossible. Sarah has said that by the time she was 6, she already understood the rule of the house. Every word she said, every choice she made, every mistake she made, any of it could become Sunday's news. There was no room to grow up quietly, no space to fail the way other kids failed. And then, at 13, she made the mistake the church would never forget. Broken at 13. In 2001, Sarah got pregnant. She hid it for 5 months. A 13-year-old girl, wearing loose clothes to hide her belly, sitting in the front pew every Sunday while her father preached about purity. She went to school every morning. She came home every afternoon. And every night, she lay in bed, knowing the truth inside her body would have to come out eventually. When her father found out, he didn't yell. He didn't send her away. But something changed permanently that day, the way the congregation looked at her. In June 2002, at 14 years old, Sarah gave birth to her first son. His name was Malachi. The news spread beyond the church walls. Christian media covered it. Some members of the Potter's House wrote letters demanding T.D. Jakes step down, arguing that a man who couldn't manage his own household had no business leading God's house. Some people left the church entirely. Others stayed, but looked at Sarah differently. The hugs got lighter, the smiles got tighter. She kept going to school. She graduated in the top 10% of her class while raising an infant. She enrolled at Texas Christian University and started college at 16. On paper, it looked like a perfect comeback story. But years later, Sarah would write, "I lived too long with the name people gave me. Mistake. I heard it in every glance, in every greeting, in the way people hugged me a little lighter than they hugged everyone else." She didn't know it at 14, but that was only the beginning. The marriage and the dark years. In 2008, at 19, Sarah married Robert Henson. He was an NFL player with the Washington Redskins. The wedding happened fast. Christian media called it a redemption story. It wasn't. Sarah would later write in her book, Lost and Found, that the marriage was a kind of escape. She wanted out from under the Jake's name, out from under the eyes of the congregation, out from under the feeling that she would always be the girl who made the mistake. She believed marriage would prove to everyone that she had grown up. She had her second child during that marriage. From the outside, everything looked perfect. A young NFL player, a beautiful young wife, 2 kids, a house in Washington. Inside, the marriage was collapsing. Sarah wrote about the nights she cried alone in hotel bathrooms after her husband's games. She wrote about the exhaustion of playing the role of the wife who's fine every single morning. She wrote about the loneliness of a marriage between 2 people who were both too young to know how to love each other. In 2012, at 23 years old, Sarah filed for divorce. On paper, it was a second fall. A Christian woman, a pastor's daughter, divorced at 23 with 2 children. In conservative Christian circles, this wasn't just a personal failure, this was a stain. She moved back to Dallas. She took whatever work she could find to support her boys. She stayed away from her father's church for a while because every Sunday visit meant walking past people who remembered exactly who she was. Sarah had 2 clear options: disappear forever, or find a way back in. She chose neither. She chose a third path, one no one in the Jakes family had ever walked before. The man and her own voice. In 2013, Sarah attended an event in Los Angeles where a pastor named Touré Roberts was speaking. Touré wasn't an ordinary pastor. He was 41. He was 16 years older than Sarah. He was divorced. He had 3 children from his first marriage. And he was the founder of One Church, a Los Angeles congregation built for young people, creatives, and the Hollywood crowd. In conservative Christian circles, Touré was a question mark. In Sarah's life, he became an answer. They dated for nearly a year. When word of the relationship leaked, the backlash from parts of the Christian community was loud. A divorced pastor marrying a divorced pastor's daughter, to many, this wasn't supposed to happen. Christian blogs wrote critical posts. Some members of the Potter's house voiced their disappointment publicly. There were quiet conversations in church hallways. There were not-so-quiet sermons in other churches. In September 2014, Sarah and Touré got married anyway. They merged their families immediately. Sarah brought 2 boys. Touré brought 3 children of his own. 2 years later, they had Ella, their first child, together. The household became 6 kids under one roof. And then Sarah did something most people didn't see coming. In 2017, she launched a movement called Woman Evolve. It started small, a podcast, a few speaking events. She didn't pretend to be perfect. She talked openly about getting pregnant at 13, about her failed first marriage, about the nights crying in hotel bathrooms, about what it felt like to be judged by the very church that was supposed to love her. Traditional pastors didn't do this. That's exactly why it worked. Within 5 years, Woman Evolve became a phenomenon. Conferences sold out. Tens of thousands of women bought tickets. Her books hit the New York Times bestseller list. In 2023, Time magazine named her to the Time 100 Next List Leaders Shaping the Future. The tribute was written by Tyler Perry, who'd known her for decades. She had done what her father never managed to do. She had built a voice that was entirely her own, not a shadow, not an echo, a voice. She thought that was the happy ending. In November 2024, something happened that would prove her wrong. Her father's collapse. It was a Sunday morning at the Potter's house. T.D. Jakes was preaching, the way he had every Sunday for nearly 30 years. The cameras were rolling. Thousands of people were in the room. Millions more were watching the live stream from their homes. Then, mid-sentence, he stopped. He grabbed the pulpit. His face changed color. His body started to lock up. For a few seconds, he could barely stand. The church's medical team rushed onto the stage. The service ended abruptly. The live stream cut to black. T.D. Jakes had just suffered a massive heart attack on stage, in front of the entire world. He was rushed to the hospital. He would later tell the public, "5 more minutes, and I would have been dead." Doctors had to act fast. For days, the Potter's House community didn't know if he would survive. He survived. But he knew one thing for certain. He could not lead the church the same way anymore. On July 6th, 2025, T.D. Jakes officially handed over the leadership of the Potter's House. Not to a board, not to a hand-picked male protege, to his daughter and to her husband. On that day, Sarah Jakes Roberts, the same girl who got pregnant at 13 inside that very church, officially became co-senior pastor of 30,000 members. It was a historic moment, a near-perfect redemption arc. The girl the church had once judged was now sitting in her father's seat, but the pressure on her was unlike anything she had ever known. 30,000 members, a 30-year legacy, millions of viewers watching every sermon, and one unspoken question hanging over her head. Was she really worthy of that chair? Sarah had 9 months to prove it. 9 months. No more. The night of April 18th. Sunday, April 12th, 2026, started like any other Sunday at the Potter's House. The stage lights came up. The choir took its place. Tens of thousands of people settled into their seats, eyes locked on the woman walking up to the pulpit. Sarah Jakes Roberts preached for nearly an hour that morning. The sermon was on the Apostle Paul's letter to the Corinthians. She spoke about the weakness of the flesh. She spoke about how God uses imperfect bodies that are scarred, bodies that are broken to do His greatest work. She closed with a prayer. Somewhere in that prayer, she said one ordinary line, "And Lord, we pray for those who are going through changes in their physical bodies." She prayed for healing. She prayed for strength. No one thought twice about it. Not one head turned, not one eyebrow raised. It was just another line in another Sunday prayer. 6 days later, that line would be replayed millions of times. It would become the line the entire internet couldn't stop talking about. Saturday night, April 18th. The Roberts house was quiet. It was a normal family evening, the kind every family has and never remembers. Sarah's 10-year-old daughter, Ella, wanted to go play on the backyard trampoline. It was a game the two of them had played dozens of times before. Sarah went out with her. For a moment, it was just laughter in the dark. A mother and a daughter on a Saturday night. And then Sarah jumped, landed wrong, and heard a sound she would later describe in her own words on Instagram. Not one snap, but several pops, one after another, coming from her own neck. Everything stopped. She couldn't feel her arms. Her legs wouldn't move. She lay flat on the trampoline, looking up at the dark sky, and she knew. Something had gone very wrong. Ella ran inside to get her father. Touré came out, took one look at his wife, and called 911. The ambulance came fast. The first hospital couldn't handle the injury. They transferred her to a larger trauma center. What followed was hours. Hours of CT scans, hours of MRIs, hours of the family sitting under fluorescent lights in a waiting room, waiting for someone to come out and tell them something. T.D. Jakes would later describe that night from his own pulpit. His voice broke as he said it. We sat there for hours and hours, waiting to find out about her well-being, about her mobility, or whether she might ultimately pass away. A giant on a global stage. A father in a hospital chair. In that moment, no different from any other father. The results came in early the next morning. Sarah had fractured a vertebra. She had multiple herniated discs. The damage was serious. The room went still. And then the doctor said the word that changed everything. But no bone had pressed into the spinal cord. There was no paralysis. The doctor looked at her and said the line Sarah would carry with her for the rest of her life. One disc higher, one disc lower. And this would have been a different story. She was ordered into a neck brace for 6 weeks. Every event was canceled. Every sermon was paused. The woman whose voice had built an empire was suddenly told not to use her body at all. A day later, from her hospital bed, she did the only thing she knew how to do. She spoke. She posted one photo to Instagram. In it, she wore the brace and a small, tired smile. The caption was a single sentence. "Last night was scary. I was almost paralyzed, but God didn't see fit to let that be my story." The post got millions of reactions in less than 24 hours. It wasn't just a hospital update, it was a declaration. For 20 years, this woman had been preaching about being broken. On the night of April 18, 2026, she finally survived being broken, not as a sermon, but as bone and cartilage and 3 pops in the dark. When the floor is no longer a metaphor. Here's what I keep thinking about. In the same family, a father nearly died on a pulpit in November 2024. His daughter nearly became paralyzed playing with her own child in April 2026. The 2 events were 17 months apart. She inherited his empire in July 2025. 9 months later, she was lying in a hospital bed, asking the same question her father had once asked. Why now? For 20 years, Sarah Jakes Roberts had been preaching about brokenness. She had written books about it. She had built an entire movement, Woman Evolve, for women who felt broken. Millions of people had cried listening to her speak. But until the night of April 18, 2026, she had never actually heard her own neck break. Not as metaphor, not as sermon material, as a real sound. 3 pops in the dark. That sermon from 6 days earlier, the one about changes in the physical body, many people in her congregation now call it prophetic. Sarah hasn't commented on that interpretation. She may never. What she has said from her hospital bed is the simplest thing. God didn't see fit to let that be my story. She will preach again. The church has announced she's recovering well. Doctors expect a full recovery in time. But one thing will never be the same. When she steps back onto that pulpit in a few months, in half a year, she won't be preaching about brokenness as a concept anymore. She'll be preaching about it as a sound, a feeling, a real night in her real life. The question I want to leave with you isn't what Sarah will say next. The question is this. In the same family, a father nearly dies on a pulpit. A daughter nearly becomes paralyzed playing with her own child, both within 17 months of each other. Is this a coincidence, the cost of a legacy, or something deeper? Write your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And if you're going through a fall of your own right now, physical, emotional, spiritual, remember what Sarah wrote from that hospital bed. God didn't see fit to let that be my story. Yours isn't over either.